Whoever wins gets $1 million.
So great.
And so we're in the final. Keep in mind, I've played in 3 championship finals my whole life. I've lost them all. Okay. So I'm coming off a lot of losses in a championship game. On average, I would say I made about $15,000 a year playing professional soccer. There were no bonuses. There was no money to play for in a championship. So this type of scenario never really existed for me. And then add another layer where my wife is there. My daughter, Luna, stays up past her bedtime. She's at the tournament. I'm amongst these legends. Michelle Akers is our GM. Mia Hamm is our head coach. Like I couldn't even make this stuff up. And so when we won that championship final, it was almost like equal sense relief. I think people can relate to this of like, finally, and equal sense joy of, I cannot believe it. Like, this is just such a beautiful full circle moment for me to win this championship, win money. And I'm 42 at that point almost, right? With my daughter there, with my wife there, my daughter who now will have more opportunities than I could ever dream of if she wanted to be an athlete, could make more money than I could ever dream of. I mean, just the progress within like the 10 years, since it's awesome. Been monumental. And so I think that moment was just so grandiose for so many reasons.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-host DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
On this episode of Limitless Minds, we are lucky to have Joanna Lohman, a retired professional soccer player who last played for the Washington Spirit of the National Women's Soccer League. She previously played for the Washington Freedom and Philadelphia Independence. In addition, she served as the general manager of the Washington Freedom Futures. She's a former member of the United States women's national soccer team and the author of the book Raising Tomorrow's Champions. DJ and I have known Jo for a few years now, and she's one of the OG room tilters, one of our world-class coaches in the Limitless Minds mental fitness platform. So needless to say, we're excited to have Joanna join us on this week's episode. Check it out. Joanna, we're excited to have you on the Limitless Minds podcast on this episode.
Hello.
That's right.
Let's go.
That's right. So, we've known Jo for a long time. She's been one of the kind of the OG room tilters coaches in our platform and kind of one of those shining lights and just, positive energy, rocket fuel for some of the clients that we serve. And we're just excited to share what we know about Jo with the people. You know what I mean? Give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want, Harry Wilson. That's what we do, man.
Yeah. But for those that don't know you yet, Jo, I mean, we should start off with like the general kind of like background overall, kind of like, early life, where you're at. I know you grew up in Maryland and still on the East Coast, and certainly obviously a love for soccer, clearly. But also the family stuff. And maybe we'll start there. How's Luna doing? Introduce the people to Luna.
Yeah, they need to know. They need to know Luna.
See. Here's an older picture of Luna.
Oh,
yeah.
Actually, today she turns 20 months.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
She's got an incredible personality. She's very social, which has been fun for us. She says hello to everyone and is you describe me as rocket fuel. I think Luna can also be described as rocket fuel.
That's cool.
That's so cool. And
awesome. We have some big news as a family. I got a text about less than a week ago, really, from the chief of sports diplomacy at the State Department. And he said, do you want to be a keynote speaker at an event in Paris on EqualPay on September? Not much time. And you guys will love this. He said, they asked for Steph Curry. I couldn't get Steph Curry, so I gave them Jo Lohman as the next option. And I just love the idea that I'm second to Steph Curry. And we said yes. And we're bringing the whole family. So Melody's flying over with me. Luna's flying over. We leave next Tuesday night, and we'll be there in Paris for 5 days. And I get to do a keynote on EqualPay, which is just something
awesome.
that's incredibly special to me.
Well, listen, so, back to, kind of the backstory. So you grew up in Maryland, obviously an athlete. Tell us a little bit about growing up and how that led you to soccer, and take us back to the East Coast.
Area code 301, proud baby. So Montgomery County, Maryland. I'm actually in their Sports Hall of Fame. So that was really special for me last year, being inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame, also in my high school Sports Hall of Fame. So grounded in Montgomery County now too, which is pretty awesome for my family. Growing up, I had, and this is true of a lot of female athletes of my generation, I had an older brother. So my older brother, Peter, I also had an older sister. I really followed in my brother's footsteps when it came to playing sports. So on any given day, you would find us outside, running the streets, playing basketball, tennis, baseball, football, rugby. I kid you not, guys. Like, I'm playing rugby and football with boys who were 3 years older than me, coming home with bloody noses.
Wow.
Great story of my brother pushing me off the bed when we were jumping on it, breaking my arm. He used to sing me a song that said, "I am the best, you are the worst." So, I was very shaped and modeled by this childhood idyllic way that I got to spend time with him and his friends, and all of my friends were boys. So I would say I was your quintessential tomboy, and really came alive on the fields, on the basketball courts, in a pair of Air Jordans. So really, from minute one, if we think about gender norms and expectations, I was living outside of the box. There were definitely years where I felt more comfortable as an outsider. I think elementary school, 5th grade, I always remember as the best year of my life, because I felt like norms weren't as enforced. So cultural, religious, gender, societal. And then I remember 6th grade really feeling like I had to become, quote unquote, a girl. So that meant like buying pink clothing, sitting with the girls at the lunch table. There was a shift. And I still continued to be athletic. I played soccer seriously. I played multiple sports in high school. But it was definitely a journey for me personally, when it came to identity, when it came to finding myself. But I believe sport was a huge factor in me being able to really find those pieces of my identity that really defined me. I was a great athlete in high school, and then was heavily recruited for soccer, and chose Penn State University because it was a newer program. I felt like I would make a serious impact as a freshman. Went on to have a great 4-year career there, 4-time academic All-American, 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year, captain of the team. And, I always call myself a mathlete because I majored in business, minored in math, graduated with a 3.98 GPA. Okay.
But Joe, the real question is, if you add them all up, how many sticky buns did you eat at Penn State? That's the real question.
I was on the field, DJ. I didn't have time to eat sticky buns. But the creamery, the ice cream, a little peachy paterno, that was my vibe. And throughout that time, I was being called up into various national teams. So youth national teams, U18, under 21 national team. I was the captain. I really got my first international cap with the full women's national team while I was in college. So this was really the stepping stones to Joe becoming eventually a professional athlete for 16 years.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Do you, as you kind of went through that process in your soccer career, is there anybody that kind of stood out to you? Because now you're obviously entrenched in this, mental game aspect of, of what you did in your sport and now what you do in your career. Is there anybody that stood out to you that had real mental toughness or had an elite mindset at an early age?
Absolutely. I think back to the 1999 Women's World Cup team. You guys, I'm sure, remember them. Mia Hamm, Julie Foudy, Michelle Akers was named by FIFA as the player of the century. Michelle Akers, to me, was the GOAT. And to be able to watch them win the World Cup in a sold-out Rose Bowl stadium, 90,000 people in the stadium, 40 million watching on TV. At that time, it was the most viewed soccer game in history. And then they came to the White House to celebrate that World Cup victory. So having lived close to the White House, I was 17 years old. I was invited as a youth soccer player to celebrate with them as President Clinton honored them. And I remember, guys, like it was yesterday, seeing them walk off the team bus, seeing them lift that trophy. And I think it was the first time in my life where I fully believed without a doubt in my mind that I could write my own story. Because visibility matters and you have to see it to really believe it. And that moment I got to see it up close and personal. And even my teammates who were with me embarrassed me and told Bernie Chastain, they said that, she's going to make the national team one day. And that was the day the dream truly came alive again, because it became tangible. And so when I got home, I knew what I wanted to work towards. I knew who I wanted to become. And you asked about mental toughness. That World Cup, in the fashion that it happened in these huge stadiums with these massive crowds, it was in spite of FIFA, which is the world governing body. FIFA really wanted them to play in small venues. They were afraid the team was going to be embarrassed by the amount of fans that they attracted. And so these players literally sold tickets out of their back pocket. They did. Yeah, no, it was the story. There's a documentary about it. It is absolutely incredible the way that they put the importance, I would say, awareness of this team on their own backs in spite of the world governing body to really build the momentum of what we see now as the absolute explosion of women's sports. So, that was a watershed moment, a pinnacle moment, not just for female athletes, but for women in general, and our step towards equal pay today. So really, those were the shoulders that I stood on for the majority of my life.
Those pioneers, those barrier breakers, were able to accomplish that pre-social media, right? And imagine what those influencers, if you will, and I don't mean influencers in the current sense, but influencers as in moving, building a movement, what they could have done with social media, right, in their back pocket, right? So that's fantastic. And so obviously, you ended up going from Maryland to playing professionally, going from Penn State to playing professionally. Listen, and now you're forging kind of another chapter in your journey post career. Tell us a little bit about that transition from professional soccer to some of the current roles as an author, a coach, a speaker, etc. Tell us about that journey and that transition, because I know that a lot of athletes, having been one myself and watching my brother and my sister play, and then for my sister post career, if you will, that transition can be tough for a lot of athletes, right? Trying to figure out what their identity is and where they fit in and how to land their feet and sink their teeth into it. And so, as you're a business major, you're coming out of playing professional career. Did you already know kind of what you had your eyes set on, or was that a challenge, or how did that land?
I've been thinking a lot about this question recently because I'm finding myself playing more soccer now than I have since I retired. And I think naturally when I retired, I created distance from the sport because I felt like I really wanted to establish myself in my next career. And I felt like my retirement was quite healthy, Harry, because I actually had torn my ACL in 2017. And that was a huge identity challenge for me. As many athletes do, I wrapped my identity so tightly around a sport. And 2017 was supposed to be my year. I was supposed to have record setting. I was in commercials for the league. I was truly going to be an all-star. And I tore my ACL in the 11th minute of the first game of the season. And so I could not believe it was my reality. And knowing the shoulds, coulds, and woulds of that season, I should have contributed. I should have been a leading goal scorer. I could have been an all-star. It was a process of grieving. And in that grieving process, it also was, I would say, a blooming process for my identity, because I was able to discover who I was without a ball at my feet. Like, what did I have to contribute to the world? And I was able to experience things that I wouldn't have otherwise because I wasn't playing in games. I wasn't an integral part of the team that I had expected to be, which was equally hard, but also awakening for me as a human being. And that's when I started to become more of an advocate, more of a leading voice, I would say, in social justice, sports diplomacy, equality. I attended my first Pride parade. And having written my book, the research, I believe, shows like I was one of the first ever out and proud, female athletes in the NWSL. So naturally, people wanted to hear my story because I was comfortable speaking on it. And I think tearing the ACL, right, having that moment of identity shaping, and then knowing I could contribute off the field, my retirement felt natural. It felt organic because it got to a point where I was like, I actually have more to contribute off the field than I do on it. And so it was beautiful. Honestly, it was beautiful to walk away. It was right before COVID, so the timing felt great. And I also felt like I had an amazing relationship with the sport. I didn't feel resentful. I didn't feel like it was taken from me in 2019. I felt like it was truly my choice. And then I would say diving into my second career, I first started to create that distance. Like, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And as athletes, you are so trained to invest and commit your whole heart, body, mind, and soul to your craft. And I wanted to do that in my next phase of my career. And so public speaking felt like a natural next step. I got the same emotions before I stepped on stage as I would before a game. And I'm like, okay, that's it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I really launched myself into public speaking, got a master's in public speaking at a program, found you all after my career, which helped me, one, to publicly speak, and two, about mental performance, which was something that I lived and breathed. And so that felt really great, that transition. And like I said to you, I've been thinking more about my retirement recently because I am still consistently playing soccer. And so I like to say now that I didn't retire, I refired. And that's the way I like to reframe it, because it's not like I went out to pasture to die, so to speak, right? Like as some sort of farm animal when you retire. That's kind of how we think about it. I refired myself and explore different dimensions of my identity to then almost come back full circle. And now I can see that soccer piece of me is like, it's in my DNA. It's still so important to me. So I don't want to leave it behind. I want to just include it in new fun ways. When I speak for Limitless Minds, I have a great time of like building mathematical formulas using soccer that connects it to the client. And I mean, let's be real. As a female athlete, you are so used to challenge, change, adversity, pressure, leagues failing, moving. You couldn't pick in my generation, a more unstable career. So there are so many lessons that translate into the world that we exist in now with Limitless Minds, biotech, pharma, these corporations and companies that are dealing with challenge, change, adversity, pressure on a daily basis. So it seems like a very like holistic, natural next step for me.
That's so great. You recently had posted around, was it the 7-on-7 tournament that you played in?
Yes.
Yes. It's you guys won the tournament, correct?
Yes, we did.
And got a nice little payout.
Yes, we did.
But you put it in context of what you had made in your professional career versus what you made in that tournament. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that and the feeling that you had and walk us through that.
Yeah, that was an incredible experience. So it was a tournament called the Soccer Tournament, and our first year we had to play against the men. So we were the only women's team playing against men. And so we were playing against teams like Wrexham. A lot of people would recognize these names, former professional men, even current professional men. And so the competition was not fair, right? Because we know biologically men are faster and stronger than women. It's science. And, but we were so popular because we were the U.S. women's national team, essentially. We were the alumni, that we sold the second most tickets to Wrexham. We really brought a lot of awareness to the tournament. So this coming year, we negotiated and really advocated for a women's only bracket. So again, in the DNA of the women's national team is this push for equality and justice. So we create a women's only bracket. We have 8 teams on the women's side instead of 48 teams on the men's side. So this is my opinion, but the first time in history where the women have a better chance of making money than the men. Because both sides get paid $1 million. Whoever wins gets $1 million.
So great.
And so we're in the final. Keep in mind, I've played in 3 championship finals my whole life. I've lost them all. Okay. So I'm coming off a lot of losses in the championship game. On average, I would say I made about $15,000 a year playing professional soccer. There were no bonuses. There was no money to play for in a championship. So this type of scenario never really existed for me. And then add another layer where my wife is there. My daughter, Luna, stays up past her bedtime. She's at the tournament. I'm amongst these legends. Michelle Akers is our GM. Mia Hamm is our head coach. Like I couldn't even make this stuff up. And so when we won that championship final, it was almost like equal sense relief. I think people can relate to this of like, finally, and equal sense joy of, I cannot believe it. Like, this is just such a beautiful full circle moment for me to win this championship, win money. And I'm 42 at that point almost, right? With my daughter there, with my wife there, my daughter who now will have more opportunities than I could ever dream of if she wanted to be an athlete, could make more money than I could ever dream of. I mean, just the progress within like the 10 years, since it's awesome. Been monumental. And so I think that moment was just so grandiose for so many reasons. I'm also someone who likes to self-reflect. So just to be able to sit down and be like, wow, that was effing awesome. Like that's that was cool. Just so damn beautiful. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Amazing. It's amazing. Now so obviously, this is a big part of kind of like, what I wanted to make part of our conversation, right? You've been a powerful voice for equal pay and access, and gender equality and equal pay for women is an essential, important discussion, right? In the pursuit for an equitable society, right? So tell us a little bit more about your experience, why this is important to you. And honestly, I'm really curious to hear from you. Like, where do you think we're at, and what does good really look like as we forge that path?
It's so cool because this really ties into Limitless Minds. Like, we're talking about unlocking human potential. And if you don't give a class of individuals equal access to resources, equal access to opportunities, you cannot unlock their potential. I asked the question of, how does a female athlete ever reach her full potential if she's deemed unessential, right? Like, how does a female athlete ever reach her full potential if she is deemed unessential? And historically, we have deemed female athletes as unessential to society. We have not given them the resources, the facilities, the science, the data, the ability to be able to pursue their craft in a way that unlocks their full potential. And now we're starting to see this transition. We're starting to see this explosion of women's sports, as I say, but it has taken generations. It takes generations to shift culture, right? Because that's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to shift societal beliefs, expectations, stereotypes of what a female athlete is. And now in 2024, records are cascading like Caitlin Clark's 3-pointers, right? It's like every day we are making history because records are being broken. You see the 2024 NCAA women's final having greater TV ratings than the men. You're seeing the last Women's World Cup having the greatest ratings. You were seeing research showing that female athletes are the most effective brand storytellers. You have an Olympics, first time in history, that had full gender parity. We have the highest valuation of any women's professional sports team at $250 million with Angel City FC. So it's just, I could go on and on, right? Like, we could spend the entire hour talking about this. And with that being said, there is still a gender pay wage gap, right? There are still only 15% of media coverage is on the women. And visibility matters. When we're not on TV as much, when we're not in the newspapers as much, or on whatever streaming that you have, they can't get as much lucrative endorsement deals, right? It continues to really widen this pay gap. And so I love the idea of celebrating progress and then also elevating what the future can look like. And I think we can celebrate how far we have come. Yes, we used to, Michelle Akers and Mia Hamm used to get $10 a day. Michelle Akers told a story about having to buy her own cleats. So that's kind of where we're coming from to now, where you have the Trinity Rodmans, where you have the Caitlin Clarks, you have the Angel Reeses, like really, you see them in commercials. They have their own endorsement deals, but they are the upper echelon. I still think that middle portion really needs to be uplifted. I think the average, I want to say average, but average professional female athlete still needs to make a living wage. And I think that responsibility falls on everyone, right? We all have the responsibility to watch when we can, to go to games, to broadcast them, to put them in the media, to speak about women's sports 365 days a year, right? Like, and we speak about them in a way that is educated and we have passion. All these ways, and governing bodies, all these ways are ways that we can continue to uplift this conversation and get to a point. I think it'll still be 20 years where we'll get full pay equity for male and female athletes.
Yeah. I just remember, watching my sister play at Stanford. She was there for 6 years, which was like, an eternity, it felt like. But I remember, I want to say it was 2021, and Stanford was in the NCAA tournament, and I think that was the year they won the national championship. But I remember it was one of the Stanford players who took a, kind of a casual video of the facilities that they had, right? And then it popped up on the gram or TikTok or whatever it was. And, and that was part and parcel to kind of what ensued this big conversation around, wait a second, how come the men have all of these resources, facilities, et cetera, and the women have like a janitor's closet,
exactly.
Right. And that was fascinating because obviously I was really close to it and that at that moment. And even for me, that kind of like made me raise my eyebrows. Right. And for DJ and I mean, collectively we have 6 daughters, 3 apiece. Right. And so this is an important topic for us, and I happen to have some daughters that are athletes. But it's not just about athletes, right? I mean, it's also kind of equal pay across the board from athletics to business and so on and so forth. And so it's such an important topic. And I think we mentioned social media earlier, and I feel like and you mentioned like kind of that awareness and like, and viewership, right? And what it feels like social media is bringing some of these is part of what's bringing some of these conversations to the surface, because now people are actually seeing the problem, right? And the problem is becoming closer to their everyday and more relevant to folks that can be allies, folks that are in the middle of it and experiencing themselves, and of course then you also have kind of pay, and earnings capabilities relative to social media and NIL and everything. Obviously being a college athlete, and you mentioned kind of everything you did at Penn State. How do you feel like NIL is impacting kind of that gender equality and equal pay, path that we're trying to tread? How do you feel like that's going to impact it over time?
It's huge. It's massive. It's massive because it's giving female athletes a platform that they wouldn't have otherwise to make a lucrative income. And I think research is showing that female athletes are making more in NIL dollars than male athletes are. And the research also shows that female athletes are the most effective brand storytellers. So you're seeing companies, organizations attaching themselves to female athletes because, one, people trust us more. They just do. They trust us more. We seem more authentic. I think the journey of being a female athlete is more relatable because there is so much struggle in it. And you see these women really being able to, I think, revolutionize buying trends and influence culture just by being authentically themselves and telling their own story. Yeah. And so I think NIL has really opened up doors for female athletes to really gain an awareness and popularity. And I love that you said, Harry, we say at Limitless Minds all the time that awareness is the first step to behavior change. And so if you're not aware of what I would call the discriminations that exist within female sports or within any area of life, how can we create change? And legislation always lags what we desire, I think, as a culture. And so legislation has been a big part of this too. You had Title IX back in 1972. You had the Equal Pay Act, Equal Pay USA, Team USA Act in 2022, where USA athletes get paid equally. So you see this legislation as also a huge piece of it. You have NIL. You have the NWSL, who just signed a collective bargaining agreement that was historic, where really it's not what you see in the NFL, where it's almost like owners versus athletes, right? You see a league where they're working together. A rising tide lifts all ships, to realize that, okay, if we work together, if we have this collaboration, we can actually both make more profits in the meantime. So I think it's massive because it's really giving a bigger platform to women to be able to tell their stories.
That's great. Well, let's fast forward 20 years. All right. Luna's what? Luna's 21. Is that right?
Yeah.
So she'll be 21. What does women's sports look like in 20 years?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I'm going to speak optimistically with rose-colored glasses, but you will see there's a stadium in Kansas City, a women's specific soccer stadium, the only stadium in the world that is women's specific. I think this is going to be the trend in the world. You're going to have female only, women's specific training facilities. You are going to have women's specific stadiums. We are going to have, it's actually starting now, innovation hubs. So like research centers based only on female athletes, because right now, from what I understand, only 6% of research goes to female athletes. So what does that mean? We have no idea how a woman's period affects her training. We have no idea how her genetic, our DNA affects our training. And now when we have this cutting edge research started by Michelle Kang, who's the owner of the Washington Spirit, she started an innovation hub called Kaniska. You're going to see more of this. You're going to have advanced science. You're going to have advanced facilities. You're going to have greater resources, more investment. I think you're just going to have a continued global explosion because the potential is there. The market is not saturated. Mm-hmm. And the connection from the female athlete to the fan is, in my opinion, it's supreme, right? It's authentic. It's real. You're seeing more women watch sports. You're seeing women have the buying power at home. So you're going to see this massive transition where I think women's sports, which makes about a billion globally right now in 2024, I think you're going to have that, times 10.
That's awesome. Really good.
Yeah. Well,
that's exciting too. I'm going to say, Harry, that's exciting for our
your daughters, right?
That's right. And right? No question.
DJ and I had a leader in our past careers in pharma named Lou, who would always say when you told him something good, right? But he wasn't, but he was trying to be optimistic. He'd be like, "From your lips to God's ears," and so
your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, so I'll say that.
That's right.
And there's such a high number of female athletes in the C-suites, right? Like we know it's 90+% of C-suite executive leaders are former female athletes. So there you go, like the connection to business, the connection to society, like everything is uplifted when we grow women's athletics.
It's good. 100%. Really good. Now we mentioned your advocacy for equal pay and gender equality, but you've also been a tremendous leader and advocate for the LGBTQ plus community, and with that, right, requires a certain level of like courage and your conviction, right, being able to stand alone in some cases, and really be a beacon for those in that community and those that want to be allies for that community. And with that comes a lot of unique challenges, right? And I imagine that it requires you to have a certain level of adversity tolerance, as we like to say, an adversity tolerance that you've built. Now you're lucky in some ways because of athletics. I imagine that you've kind of built this adversity tolerance over time. Tell us about how your time in athletics and really traversing some of the headwinds that you already talked about, how that's correlating to the headwinds that you're traversing being an advocate for the the LGBTQ plus community.
I love this question. I've also been thinking about this recently too. It does take a lot of courage to show up authentically, however you identify. And I realize I am someone who is privileged, right? By the color of my skin, by the family I have come from, by the country I am born into. And with privilege comes responsibility. I feel safe. I generally feel safe in my skin as a queer, masculine presenting, cis woman. And so I want to use that responsibility to speak for those who are forced into silence, because there are so many around the world who cannot authentically show up in fear of being in danger. And the beauty of playing sports for your entire life is that sport is so unique in that it gives you a public safe space to suffer. So I'll say that again. It gives you a public safe space to suffer. I don't think any other environment gives you that from a young age. I am a big fan of suffering. I think controlled, safe suffering is what you're talking about, which is an adversity tolerance. That builds a sense of resilience that gives you a foundation to launch off of. And because of the way that I express my gender, I sit in front of you today with a mohawk. I'm muscular, right? I'm masculine presenting, very often mistaken for a man. I'm able to sit in this like middle space, guys. Like there's so much beauty in the middle. because we live in such a binary world where we want things to be either other, but in reality, every damn thing is gray. Life is so nuanced. It is so layered that being able to sit in the middle and not feel like you're on fire, I think is such an asset in this world. And so, I will have days where I correct people. I will have days where I'm just like, I'm a dude today. That's fine by me. I don't have the energy, right? And it really depends on how close that person is to me, what mood I'm in that day. And this is going to be a lifelong situation that I have to deal with. And it is a consequence of how I choose to look, right? I understand that. I'm choosing to look this way. I could easily grow out my hair. I could, if I wanted to, marry a man to make my life, quote unquote, easier in societal eyes. But I refuse to do those things because I know Joe feels most beautiful in the way that I'm showing up right now. And if there's any message that we want to send our kids, it's to show up in a way that you feel beautiful, because the energy you give to the world is contagious. And so there will always be consequences to the way that I live my life. But I'm willing to accept those consequences because I'm at least making the path easier for someone who walks behind me, who may look like me, who expresses their gender in a different way, who identifies their sexual orientation in a different way. And that to me is like, there's nothing higher that you can do in your life than to make the path easier for those who come behind you. And so sitting in that middle space, that discomfort now with a daughter who I have her call me JoJo. She doesn't call me mom. If she does, I'm totally cool with it. But like, I don't go by mom, I go by JoJo. We're going to be traveling to Paris, like we talked about. Airports are like gender war zones, especially traveling internationally. It's always man or woman, bathrooms, TSA pre-check, like, oh my God, right? So there will be some really cool conversations that Luna and I will have to have. Like, it's okay. It's okay, Luna, if someone mistakes me for a man. It's okay if they don't know who JoJo is. And it's like super confusing and everyone, wants to just crawl into the corner and feel uncomfortable. Like, it's okay because that's life. And we can do hard things, right? Like, we can do hard things in order to show up and feel whole and complete in our own skin.
It's so great. You talk about the middle and just being great in the middle. It's last night, every night before my girls go to sleep, I go in there, talk to them, pray with them. And one of the things, my oldest Shea, we were talking last night, and she's having some challenges right now, just juggling. It's her junior year in high school. Yeah. She's juggling school, cross country, friends, all the different things. And she's having to make decisions constantly. And she has a mind of almost like a lawyer, right? Everything is black and white. And when I was talking to her, I told her, I said, sweetie, that you are a natural leader. People follow you, you make good decisions. I said, being a leader is being great in the gray. That gray area that you're talking about, like, it's like people don't come to you or I or even her when the decision is easy. It's they come to it when there's not a real clear answer, when it's gray. And I think, cultivating that gray area and how to navigate in it, how to be great in the middle. We talk a lot about moving the middle of organizations, because that's where you see moving the middle of teams. And so, I think, how you have taken the adversities from your past, embrace them, and now you're taking those things to move the middle and helping people be great in the gray. I really admire that and really appreciate that. It's really
great
awesome.
In the gray. I'm stealing that and quoting you. Great in the gray.
All good. All good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I think that you mentioned, when you think about the middle, we talk about neutral thinking a lot, right? As a Limitless Minds coach, I know this part of your talk track quite a bit, and something that, our late co-founder, Trevor Moad, wrote about. And, it reminds me of that concept of neutral thinking, right? We're all familiar with positive and negative, right? Yeah. And we feel like, positive and negative, although they're well-defined relative to outcomes, right? The score on the scoreboard, the sale that I made or didn't make, the numbers that I'm trying to hit, whatever it might be, right? But this neutral thinking area, this neutral space, is kind of the area of optimization, right? Where it's about behaviors and truth and understand, certainly recognizing the negative. We don't have to, be in Pollyanna and just kind of think, oh, everything's great, recognizing the negative, diagnosing what happened, and then coming up with a set of solutions that we can believe in, follow, demonstrate, and do. And so, neutral thinking in your world as an athlete or in business, what's your take on that? And how are you seeing some of the best performers in the world, some that have been your peers, some that you're coaching and training? How are you seeing them leverage this concept of neutral thinking?
Neutral thinking is massive. Like you said, Harry, it's behavior-based instead of being outcome-based. And sitting in our own behaviors gives us the power to choose daily on how we want to show up in this world. And so I think neutral thinking is a key to unlocking human potential. And if we continue down the Limitless Minds track of, thoughts are the drivers of our behaviors and drivers our results, like it all starts with our psychology, right? It all starts with how we perceive the world, because I fully believe that your perception drives your performance. And so it's really like drilling down into what are your thought processes, right? How are you thinking? What type of mind are you showing up with? What type of mindset are you showing up with? Because as Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you see the world changes. And so many of us don't have that training. So many of us aren't even aware of how our brain works naturally, right? It's really preference for negative. 80% of human thought is negative. And so it's not only being aware of that, but also being able to rewire or replace the thought that is negative with something that is neutral, because that neutral thought will be behavior-based. And you see the greatest performers constantly in the present moment, right? You can't be worrying about the past or the future. You have to stay present, because that's where the magic lives, right? That's where high performance lives, is in the present moment. And neutral thinking lives in the present moment. So it is action-based. It is action-oriented. It allows us to accept our current reality, good or bad. It doesn't matter. What is our next right step? And I think we all need training in that daily, because as Josh Lifrak says, human beings are meaning-making machines, right? We want to make meaning out of everything. So until we can get out of our own heads, quiet mind, sound body, big heart, I believe, is like the success in life is showing up with those three things, then we can't really access high performance. Like, we're dancing around the edges, but we're not there consistently or sustainably, which is really what is going to get you that greatness and that long achieved success.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, there's a lot of really good nuggets here, Joe. And I think as we kind of close out here, as you focus on this next stage of your career, like what do you see the future like? What do you see kind of your next big impact? What's your next big moment? And how do you continue to impact people?
It's such a great question. I think I continue seeing myself really unlocking the human behind high performance. I think as we move more towards AI, artificial intelligence, we have deep fakes, we have all these machines and robots that are seemingly taking the place of humans. I want to be someone who reminds us that it is the human who unlocks the high performance, right? We're not results, we're not outcomes, we're not numbers. Like we're human beings. And I think the more that we can lean into that, our uniqueness, our authenticity, I think the better we will be as individuals, as teams, as companies, as corporations, and we're going to get better profits and revenues. So it's consistently leaning into that humanity.
It's good.
Joe, when we think about kind of building the high performance mindset, I feel like there's an opportunity to start at a young, start with youth, right? Youth athletes, right? And I know you spend some really awesome time with youth athletes and some of the things you're doing. What are you seeing as kind of the biggest problem to solve for with like youth athletics, and how that impacts the 12 to 18-year-old student athlete, if you will? Like, what do you see as the biggest problem to solve for?
How much time do we have?
Part two.
Yeah. Right? DJ reflected this in his comments regarding his daughter. I think teenagers are incredibly overextended. I think they're doing so much, and there isn't much time or energy to sit and self-reflect. We have to go inside our own heads to get out of our own heads. And I think that is the biggest issue, is that we're busy 24/7, and busyness is a drug. And within that activity, there may or may not be achievement, right? There may or may not be the self-reflection, the self-awareness being built as individuals, which I think is the foundation of excellence in all aspects of life. Your mental fitness, your psychology is your foundation. And how much time are we spending on the psychology of these kids rather than giving them their 8th personal trainer, right? Sending them to their 7th tutor. When are we giving them time to work on that mental aspect? When are we giving them time to sit back and reflect and build these key aspects of their identity? Because if we don't give them that, we're building a generation of fragile human beings whose identity are wrapped around results, achievement, medals, scholarships, jobs. And that is a very unfulfilling, empty way to live. But I think that is what we are reinforcing each and every day with our kids.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. You think about, you're right. They are so, we don't say the B word. They are so active, right? It's crazy, right? Like, it's like, but you're right. Nobody slows down to just actually take things in, be present, slow down to speed up. But because we're just on to the next thing, and it is so outcome based, and sometimes just stepping back, being present, being in the moment, not worrying about the next thing that you have to do. I mean, that's a great lesson for us parents too, as well, because I think we get caught up in that. I know I do, to where it's like, okay, you don't want them to miss out, and we want to make sure we're exposing them to whatever it is. And the reality of it is, it's okay it's okay to say no and not be involved. So thank you for that. That's really great advice.
Hey, much easier said than done, right? Much easier said than done. And I think the systems partially are broken within youth sports. I think it's how it's worked for a long time. And unfortunately, I think we need to completely revamp it. But I'm talking about climate change here. It's only going to get worse.
Well, I think that it's, youth athletics is more of a business than it's ever been. Right. And so it's a money making machine. And as a result, I think some of the intentions of, those that are, running programs and the club sport here and the travel, sport here. I have a 12-year-old that's going from St. Louis to Philly to Chicago to Orlando to play field hockey. Right. And we've gotten sucked into it ourselves. Right. And even though we know that we have this watchful eye on, like, making sure that Gracie doesn't wrap her identity around this one sport. But also she loves it. And so there's this balance between giving her access and making sure that we're, keeping a close eye on, like, how it's shaping kind of her competitive spirit, her adversity tolerance, as we mentioned, her psychological flexibility. And so making sure that, like, yes, we might give her access to all these, resources and opportunities, but we got to, as a companion, we have to give her mental fitness kind of, resources that can make sure that she can stand up on, standing up with it. So it's good stuff, Joe. I mean, you're certainly, your expertise is valued in that area, along with kind of, all the way from Pee Wee to pro, as we say. And
yes.
So I love it. Well, listen, Joe, we selfishly, this was a great opportunity for us to spend more time with you. And
ditto. It's so good to see you both.
Yeah. So listen, we will have to have you on again if we can, and maybe that podcast is on the youth athletics and parents and sports and coaches. But yeah, we'll find some more time. Thanks for vibing with
Joe,
us.
where can people find you and find more about you?
Yeah. So my website is joannalohman.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So it's just Joanna Lohman on LinkedIn. And then Instagram, it's Joanna Lohman 15 for all the Luna content. I know what people want. Okay. Give the people what they want.
Thank you. That's right.
Okay.
People love babies, man. People love babies.
Especially chubby babies. You know what I'm saying?
You won't be a baby. You won't be a baby for long. You're going to look up and she's going to
be, it's crazy.
Off to middle school or something. Right.
Really cute.
So yeah. Well, listen, thanks for joining us, folks. Joanna Lohman's one of the best in the world. She's been a great part of the Limitless Minds team. We're happy to share her with you guys today. But remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.